So good evening, everybody, once again, and welcome to the BeCoach Academy Wisdom Café. And it's truly, truly wonderful to see all of you and to have this to share this wonderful space together. And I do really hope that despite the weather outside, you all feel warm and cozy and have, I don't know, something warming up next to you. I don't know, whatever drink of your preference. I have tea, Ray has tea, I know. Yeah, so feel free to grab a cup as well. And I would like to start maybe just from a very brief introduction of myself, of the BeCoach Academy and of the Wisdom Café. And many of you realize know Ray, but I will still introduce Ray to those who don't know him, but also for those who will be then watching the recording and would like to know who is our special guest tonight. And then we will kick off with the conversation. So my name is Elena Marsh, and I am a leadership coach, and I'm a co-founder together with Ishil, who is now on the call as well, of BeCoach Academy. And so in BeCoach Academy, we believe that coaching is it's not just a profession, or it's not a tool for the people, for better people management, or not a skill set. It's really a way of life, and it's a way of being. And our philosophy in BeCoach Academy, we resonate with the words of Rumi, who said that you're not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in one drop. And this is what belief actually coaching is. And you or anyone, any individual who is a coach or who is trained as a coach, they can create that big impact, just like a drop creates the ripples, in the water, just by their presence, by the powerful questions they ask, by their deep listening and giving the feedback. So with this kind of a vision of creating the bigger impact, we are training individuals and the leaders to be coaches and to be a better people as well. And in BeCoach Academy, generally the community is very important for us, and we organize quite frequently different kind of events for our community and also for a wider audience, the wider network. And the Wisdom Café is one of that kind of events where we invite a special guests to share their wisdom with us. And today I'm very excited to have a wonderful, which I expect to be a wonderful conversation with Ray. And as I mentioned, for those of you who doesn't know who Ray is, or those who are listening to and watching this video, I would like to introduce Ray in kind of a slightly wider way. So Ray Martin, aka the Daily Explorer, is an entrepreneur and award winner business leader. And as a coach, mentor, facilitator, speaker and writer, and mindfulness teacher, he is a torchbearer for greater human consciousness. He courageously explores both his external and internal world daily in pursuit of greater insight and wisdom about life for himself and others. Ray created the Calling All Angels Foundation and runs marathons to raise money for causes he believes in, which have included an orphanage in Nepal and an elephant sanctuary in Thailand. And whatever he does, his mission is to bring more joy and happiness into the world. Welcome, Ray, and thank you so very much for being with us here tonight.
You're so welcome. It's lovely to be here. Thanks.
Yes, and so the Wisdom Café is actually the place where it's not like me having a conversation with Ray and you're just sitting and listening. It's about all of us having a possibility to have a conversation with Ray by asking him questions, or I don't know, challenging maybe, or maybe clarifying something, I don't know. So I have prepared a couple of questions. I took 3 questions to kind of warm up a little bit, but after that I would really like to to hand over to any of you who would like to continue the conversation and to ask more questions. And whenever you're ready to ask the questions, please just raise a real hand or a virtual hand, but signal in any way to me so that I can then invite you to unmute yourself and to take the stage. Yeah, is that all right for everyone? You can show me thumb up. All right, fantastic. Okay, so then my first question to you, Ray. When we had a preliminary call with you, I mentioned that your journey reminds me very much of a hero journey described by Joseph Campbell. And for those of you who may be not very familiar with the work of Joseph Campbell, so the hero journey is kind of consists of a number of stages when the hero receives the call for adventure. Living his ordinary life. And first, the hero refuses to answer the call due to the different reasons, but eventually accepts the call and goes through a number of ordeals. And the purpose of those ordeals is the personal growth and development of a hero. And at some stage of a journey, the hero dies. But the hero dies in order to resurrect and to bring that treasure back, to his new life or to his community, to the people around him. So Ray, my question to you, which probably wouldn't be very much in a coaching style because it's 3 questions in one, but so my questions are, in your journey, because you did receive the call for adventure after the divorce, after the death of your father, and it took some time for you to actually answer that call, and there were a lot of different experiences. So you had, as I mentioned before, you ran marathons, you set up the foundation campaign, you walked to the base camp of the mountain Everest, you participated in mindfulness retreats and et cetera, et cetera. So the first question, what did die in you throughout this journey?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Wait a second, I had just said that's the first one out of 3. Okay.
All right.
So the second one.
Better write these down, I think.
Yeah. So what did die in you?
Yeah.
The second, what was the biggest ordeal? And the third, what treasure did you bring back?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'll answer some of the headlines in those, because since the whole book is really the answer to those 3 questions, it's hard to summarize or pull out particular things. But so let's start with what died. Well, there's 2 ways I could describe that. One is the character that I had become in my ordinary life, which was Ray the businessman. I never thought of that guy, which was me, as a character until I was into the beginning of the journey. Because what happened for me was, for those of you who read the book will already know this, but I was married, living in London, running a business, a successful business leader, had the sort of normal sort of anatomy of a life that most people would expect me to have. And then that life just basically collapsed. So the woman I was married to was my business partner. She left, and it forced me to go deeply into myself and ask, what had happened? Why had my life turned out like that? What was the significance of it? And those sorts of things. And in part of that phase, when I was making an inquiry, I realized that I was trying to think it all out in my head and I was getting nowhere. And someone said to me at that moment where I was really stuck and I couldn't see a way forward and it looked bleak and I was depressed and it was horrible. Someone said, why don't you just take your attention off yourself for a while and go and take care of someone else and just completely forget about your own troubles for a while. And then I think something will emerge for you. So I thought, yeah, that's a pretty good piece of advice. So I found out that one of my friends in Australia who used to live in England was there, but she had breast cancer. And I knew she was going to go through a very challenging time. She had a very young son and her husband worked full time. So I reached out and offered to go and help her for a month. I said, I'll fly to Australia. I'll just come and be with you and take care of anything I can for you. I'd like to be of service. She said, great, brilliant. That'll be amazing. So I went to Australia, did that. And then a few days at the end of that trip, I had a chance to go and visit another friend who lived further north in Cairns in Queensland. And she said to me, we're going to the theatre one evening, me and my mum. Do you want to come? So I said, yeah, okay. So I went to the theatre with her and her mum. And halfway through this play, when they have the interval, I'm reading the program. And in the program, I see this little thing that keeps drawing my attention saying, we're going to be auditioning for the next play in this theatre. And it's called Out of Order, which is a British play about a member of parliament for anyone who's English. And I said to my friends, just for a joke, I said, oh, I should be in that play. I've got the perfect English accent, be quite different to these good day mate Australians, And my friend said to me, well, we know the director of the play. Why don't you go to the audition? I said, come on, that's crazy. I'm not an actor. I've never done it in my life, etc., etc. But they say, well, just go for fun. Don't try and be in the play, but just enjoy it. So I thought, yeah, I'll do that. It's a good idea. So I went to the audition and gave it my absolute best shot, which I've been trained to do over the years. And at the end of the auditions, the director came over to me and said, Ray, what's your story? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, would you be okay with the 3 months of rehearsals and stuff like this? I said, yeah, sure. I live here. I didn't tell him I was going back to England in 3 days. He said, okay. I said, when are you going to decide who you want in the play? He said, well, in about a week's time. And I knew I'd already be back in England by then. So I kind of prepared myself to be disappointed. I didn't think I'd be offered a big part. And I got a call when I arrived, and it was him saying, we'd really like you to be in the play in the lead role, the character George. It's a very demanding character, but we think you could do it. We know you don't have much experience. Would you like to do it? And I said, God, yeah, I would love to do it, but I've already made commitments to 4 or 5 clients, and I've given them my promise that I'm going to work with them, and integrity is important to me. So I want to speak to each of them first and just see if I can get their blessing to come back. And so I did that. I called each client and I told them this story I'm telling you now. And I said, it sounds ridiculous, but I've been offered a part in this play and I feel like I've really got to do it because my life's completely fallen apart. And I feel like this is going to be a bridge into a new life for me or something. I wasn't sure what it meant, but I knew there was something powerful. And one by one, they all said, if I was in your shoes, I would definitely go and do it. So I got the blessing of all of them and I returned to Australia and I was in the play and it was a real success and it was amazing. And I've never done anything like that in my life. I've never done anything that kind of impulsive or, so spontaneous or so out of character. When I say out of character, I mean for Ray, the businessman. And that's when I knew that when I left Australia to return to England after the play, I had this feeling of dread in my body. My energy in my body was horrid. I was really not looking forward to returning to being Ray the businessman. And then it suddenly occurred to me, hang on, that guy's a character. I've created that character, just done it over like 25 years and quite unconsciously, but he's just a character that I'm inhabiting. I could kill that character off. Tony Robbins, the coach, says, he says, you're not just the actor in your life. We all think we're just the actor following the scenes, but we're the script writer and the director too. And so we can move into those positions sometimes and change the script or change the setting and then give the actor a new set of words to say in that setting. And it just all made sense to me in a way, because I'd been prepared to be an actor in a play, playing a character. It sort of landed for me as a piece of knowledge in a way it never had before because I actually had done it. So that's what died. What died in me was the character of Ray the businessman died at that point. And I had to then think, how do I reinvent myself? Who's the new character? Who is that? And at the time, I was trying to come to terms with the grief of the loss of my marriage and my dad and the business I spent 10 years crafting because they had all gone. And I read a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. I don't know if any of you have read it. You can say if you have. It's a very well-known book. This is an Australian nurse who works in a hospice where people go to spend the last days and weeks of their life. And she said she's spoken to over 1,000 people who've been in that place. And she'd asked them all the same question: what do you most regret about your life? And she said she could tell you without any reference to statistics, the top 5 things that everyone says, they were always the same. And the number one thing that people said was their biggest regret, how she wrote it in the book, was, I wished I'd lived my life true to myself. And when I read that, I was sort of stunned into silence. I thought, wow, I wonder what living life true to myself actually looks like and feels like for me now, this new character. I thought, I've got to go on a journey to find that out, the answers to that. And that's why I took the call to adventure and went off and traveled afterwards to answer that question. And then I'd say the biggest ordeal, well, there's a couple of ways of answering that too. These are questions that have got many different angles to them. So the biggest ordeal, if you talk about it physically, the biggest ordeal, I'd say that was running my first marathon, in 2009, because that took a lot of physical preparation, and I got a serious injury in the process, which I had to recover. And so that was a major physical ordeal. And probably the most physically challenging thing I'd done in my life to that point, let alone in the journey, but in my whole life. Psychologically, it was a different ordeal, because psychologically, training for a marathon wasn't that challenging. I knew the steps and I had a good coach, so I knew what to do. I just had to follow the plan. Psychologically, what was most challenging was trying to navigate my own life in a state of fear, guilt, shame, anxiety, and all those things which I felt which I was alive in me when I left, because I took my physical body out of England and landed on a lovely beach in Thailand, and all the lovely settings and white sand and sea, and it's all lovely. It looks great on the surface, but I was so fearful and so anxious and so worried about the future and so full of guilt and shame about having been a crap husband and failed at my marriage and all these things that I thought people would judge me for. I thought, how do I navigate into a new life with all that going on? It's like, it feels impossible. And so then I discovered through talking to people that one of the things that I thought could help would to do a Vipassana retreat, which is I never knew what that was. I never heard of meditation or Vipassana. Someone said, oh, you're going to this monastery with Buddhist monks for 10 days and you sit and meditate with them and they teach you about the Dharma, the Buddhist teaching. And I think you would benefit from that, Ray. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I've never been quiet for even 10 minutes, let alone 10 days. So it was quite an ordeal to go through that, because the mind is designed to keep us how we are. It's there to keep you in your comfort zone, not stop you from taking any major risks and things like this. And so you get this great opportunity during such a retreat to just watch your own mind and all the trouble it makes, and just be there in a non-judgmental, fully present way, learning and understanding about your own mind. It's quite an education.
And I came also very scary, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. But I came out of that in a very different state. My energy had completely changed. I was much more grounded, was calm. A lot of the anxiety, it's like someone had taken my noise level in my thinking from a 10 out of 10 to maybe a 2 or 3 out of 10, and turn the dial right down. There was still some noise, but it was a lot less. And I got a lot of insight from that. And I thought, I choose to find a way of having a mindfulness practice from this point on, because I can see the benefit of it. So then later I joined a Sangha and started meditating with a group, and I've still got a mindfulness practice of my own, even today, to calm myself down when I'm feeling anxious. Like even right now, I'm about to move again and it's a bit anxious. It induces some anxiety when that happens. So that's the biggest ordeal, psychological and physical. And then the last part, what was the treasure?
Yeah.
Well, so many things. I mean, so many things. My editors, bless them. I had 2 brilliant editors who helped me with the book. And when I'd written down the story, which took me 6 years to do,
wow.
They said, what would you say were the biggest lessons that you've learned from this entire journey? Because we'd like you to write something about that too. So the final chapter of the book is called Looking Back, and I've articulated in there what I think were my 6 rules for happiness. What are the 6 rules or principles or practices I have that generate my happiness? And I've described those. And so I'd say that was the treasure that I brought back for myself. I think everyone on this call, if I asked every person individually, would have their own 6 rules. They might be slightly different to mine, or could be hugely different to mine, or there'd be some overlaps for sure, because there are some commonalities we share. But I think that's one of the things in life we're all trying to do. And my friend has this phrase, we're all trying to find our way home, that place inside ourselves where we feel the most peace and the most settled. And I'm in that journey too. So this is, I think, something we all have in common here. We're all trying to find our way back home to that peaceful place of well-being. And so my 6 rules for happiness are my compass that take me back there when I'm losing it, when I'm off course, which I often am. That's a long answer to those things. I hope I've not bored everyone. But
oh, thank you so much, Ray. But to tell you the truth, I think that the treasure is, you said that this is the 6 rules is something what a treasure you brought for yourself. But I think it's again like being a drop in the ocean and spreading the ripples around.
Yeah,
it just kind of I think the big treasure is also who you became throughout the whole journey and how you show up in your relationships with other people and whoever you are communicating with. I think that there is also a treasure in it, isn't it?
I think so, because Bernadette Russell kindly wrote the foreword to the book for me, and she described my story as containing the jewels that I'd brought back to the village, which felt wonderful when she expressed it in that way. And I never thought of it, because to me it was just the life I was living. I never thought I was doing something special in that sense. And certainly when I left, I literally had never had any intention or view that I'd ever write a book. I left because I was a broken person. I was just trying to recover myself and get back to a state of well-being for myself. It never even occurred to me to write a book about it. But many people I met on the journey asked me over dinners and coffees what had happened to me. And when I told them, quite a few of them said, well, it's lovely hearing about your story, and if you ever write a book, I'd be really happy to read it. and I thought at first it made me laugh. I was just saying, God, that's so boring. Who wants to read a book about someone finding themselves? I couldn't think of anything more dull. But then after 50 or so people had said that, and then 3 years in, about 100, I thought, oh, the universe wants me to write a book. I better.
Well, you needed to hear 100 voices to be convinced. I better start
organising it, because otherwise I won't be able to give those people what they've asked for. So that's how it came to that. For me, I think the gift for the universe in how I show up now, because I'm a leadership coach and I work with a lot of people to help them have the life they want to live, the path they want to walk on. For me, I can do that work with what I call humble curiosity. I feel like I can be genuinely there, fully present in service to them without needing to be the center of attention or prove anything myself. So when I was a CEO driving a business forward and driving for tangible financial results every year, I was quite a different character. I was much more goal driven and let's win at all costs, no matter what happens to anyone who's a casualty. Let's just push forward, and if there are some casualties, so be it. And I just don't have that mindset any longer, really. So
you made a very nice breach and even partially answered my second question.
Right.
That's I could hear from your first answer how the journey impacted you on the individual and the personal level, so that the racy or as a character died, and now we have a different Ray who is an executive coach and who has so many beautiful experiences and grew so much as well. And you mentioned just now how you also changed as a coach. But before the life without a tie, you were in the business related to people development, growth, and you had a different set of values, as you have just mentioned. Then you got a break from coaching, from any kind of business life for 5 years, 6 years or so?
Yeah, it was about 4 or 5 years before I
4 or 5
returned to the
years.
world of business. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So then you returned back to the world of business. You started coaching. You started delivering the workshops and the leadership workshops, and now you continue doing so. So I was wondering how the evolvement of Ray, a coach, what's happening throughout the journey.
It's a lovely question. I'd like to answer it by referring to something I wrote in the introduction to the book, because this is such a lovely story. I know some of you have heard this, so sorry for those of you on the call who know it. But in the beginning of the book, I refer to a woman in India who's got a 10-year-old boy who's eating sweets, and she can't get him to stop. So she decides to take the boy to see his idol, who's Mahatma Gandhi. So she walks sort of 2 or 3 miles in the hot, parched sun to Gandhi's ashram with her son, and stands in front of Gandhi and says, "Mr. Gandhi, my boy won't stop eating sweets. It's bad for his health. Please, would you tell him to stop?" And Gandhi looks at the boy and looks back at her, and he says, "Madam, bring him back in 2 weeks and I'll speak to the boy." And she's a bit confused, thinking, okay, that's a bit weird, but fair enough. He is Gandhi. I'll do what he says. Goes off. 2 weeks later, walks all the way back, stands in front of Gandhi again with the boy and says, "Please tell my boy to stop eating sweets." So Gandhi looks at the boy and says, "Boy, I want you to stop eating sweets." And the boy says, "Okay." And he stops immediately. So the woman, clearly in a state of confusion, says, "But Mr. Gandhi, why couldn't you just said that to the boy 2 weeks ago?" He said, "Because, madam, 2 weeks ago, I was still eating sweets." And it's, there's so much wisdom in that story, because that was the truth for me. I was in the business of working with people to shape their lives and live their best life, but I hadn't really addressed it fully for myself. I hadn't bottomed out my own journey. And so I never felt qualified to really be a coach, even though I was doing that work. And I always felt like I signed a sort of gap inside myself, knowing that I hadn't done my own journey to my own satisfaction, if you like. And I wasn't feeling fully ready to be in that space. And now I feel qualified. I use that word broadly because I don't mean ICF or something. I mean, I feel qualified in my own terms, whatever that means, to be in that space because of the journey I've taken and the things it's taught me, and the ability to be empathetic with the experiences that I know many of us really have to face every day, which I never really fully appreciated or understood. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like you, in the past, you did coaching, but you were not a coach in your core, or at your core. And what it is for you today to be a coach.
Well, there's the technical level. There's observing all of the behaviors that you bring to a coaching relationship, like being present, non-judgmental, listening, the use of things like silence when it's necessary to help a person just have a space in which they can think for themselves, and all of those things. So all of the technical behaviors that we're taught as coaches. But another big part of it for me is kind of taking on a mantle of loving kindness and friendship, which I learned through the mindfulness practice, which was missing in my leadership vocabulary in a way. Because I feel like with all the people that I've coached, I've become someone who's created a space for them to do whatever they need to do and make the changes they want to make. But I also feel like I've become a loving, kind friend. And actually, I've become friends with a lot of the people that I've worked with. And there's a great example of a story in the book with a guy called Stephen Koukouris. I don't know if you remember him, Eleanor, from reading the book. Towards the end, I returned to Brighton from Spain to run a half marathon with this guy, Stephen, because I'd coached him during a leadership program, and he'd made great progress in his leadership, and he was well acknowledged by the group for doing so. And he was very popular. He was a lovely man. And he was born with motor neuron disabilities. So he had speech impediment. He couldn't walk properly and other things. And he'd always had a little bit of guilt and shame about those things. And in the group, he'd found a way to overcome a lot of that for himself by openly acknowledging it to everyone. And at the end of our coaching work together, he said, I really want to do a physical challenge that's like the mental challenge that I've been through. I said, oh, what do you want to do? He said, well, I don't believe I can do it, but I think I'd like to run a half marathon. And inside my head, I thought, oh my God, that's going to be really hard for him, given his physical condition. And I said, well, that's a really fantastic challenge to take on. I said, but I think if you do that, honestly, because I've run 5 marathons, I think you're going to need some support around you. So if it's okay with you, if you choose to do that, I want to run it with you by your side, So we do it together. And then you've definitely got the support that I think you're going to need. And maybe some of the other people from your group will join. He said, okay, great. I said, well, you just let me know when you've signed up for your half marathon of your choice. And then I hoped that he wouldn't do it, to be honest, because then I thought, if he doesn't do it, I don't have to train myself. I don't have to go through 10 weeks of getting ready for the race and all this sort of stuff. But maybe it's just an act of bravado. Maybe he won't do it. But a week later, he phoned me and said, I've signed up for the Brighton half marathon. Here's my number, etc. And I know David in Brighton will like this, because that's what got me to move to Brighton when I was there. And I said, good, well done. Glad you signed up. I'm going to start my training now, so we'll be ready for the race. And then on the day of the race, I was there with 6 other people from our group and him. And he was magnificent. He ran that race in just over 2 hours, and he didn't stop for a break, and he did it really brilliantly. Oh. And he really was, really committed. And I wrote the story about this because he said a lot about his inner journey that he went through to actually conquer those fears that he had. And I've described it in the book with his permission, and he let me publish the story in the book. And it's a beautiful story. And I read it out at the launch in London in November, and he was actually in the room with me. And we were both almost in tears when I was reading this, and we had a big hug in front of everybody at the launch, and it was lovely. So, he's a friend for life, that guy, for me. So it's a good example. I really love working with people at that level where I can feel like I'm a best friend as well as a coach.
Yeah. Well, gosh, listening to you, there are many more questions that come into my mind, but I would really love to. I will ask my last one, and then I will hand over to other people on the call. And so I kind of wanted to, to ask about your journey, how it started, how it went, and I wanted to ask about your you as a coach. And I now would be interested in maybe hearing about other people you work with. You gave one example now, but I remember when we had the first call with you, and I kind of asked you how often you have a coaching clients who come to you with a kind of an existential challenges, or maybe dilemmas which are similar to that of yours back to 2005, and you laughed and you said always. So I would maybe ask you to elaborate a little bit, like what challenges are people, modern leaders and executives, bringing to the conversations with you? What's the trend?
I'll try and answer that question as directly as I can, and if there's anything else you want to know, I'll add. But what I've realized from the journey I took is that it's not about, my book is not about sort of traveling and sort of leaving one's life and going off travel. It's almost not a travel book. It's more, for me, it was the conditions I needed to give myself permission to think differently. I found that staying in the same environment made it literally impossible for me to move around in my thinking, because I was just surrounded by people who just thought the same way that I did. And so I was uninspired and stuck. And so I left the environment I was in to get a complete and utter break, so I could sort of have a change in the way I looked at things. Other people have found ways of doing that without physically changing their surroundings, but that's what worked for me. But what I've learned from that is that the way we think drives everything. Our thinking drives how we feel, and our feeling drives how we behave, and our behavior determines the results that we get in life. There is this direct sort of relationship between those things. So what I've understood really most powerfully is if you want anything to change, it starts with changing the way you think about something. So it means having the awareness to examine your own beliefs and thoughts about events that are taking place. Not the events themselves, they're just the events, but how you think that event should have gone, how it actually went, what expectations you hold, what beliefs you hold. those are the things that are holding our reality in place. That's really clear to me. And so what I discovered as well is that a lot of people who are coming into management and leadership roles for the first time don't have such a clear understanding of that kind of awareness. And so I felt I could be really useful in that area, you know, to people, especially coming into leadership early in their careers, because a lot of coaching effort has been directed at people at the top of organizations who've had years of development. So there's an argument to say, well, why is so much of it directed there? Because those people are all sort of had years of development, and all the people coming up are going to develop all the bad habits first, which then a coach has got to help them undo. You know, it's kind of weird. So I thought I want to focus in that area a bit more. And I found a group of people that had a similar vision to mine. And I became part of a group in the UK where I'm doing quite a lot of work with emerging leaders and coaching and developing them. And that takes up, you know, a big chunk of my working time. And then also when I was in Asia and I met some of the people there, we could see the power of mindfulness in terms of how it was transforming our own lives, how it was bringing peace, calmness, and a sort of access to a new level of intelligence in our thinking. So we thought, wow, how do we get people in the business world access to this? Because they're not all going to come to monasteries and sit with monks and do those kinds of things. They're just not going to do that. We need to sort of take the essence of this teaching and package it into a way that we can share it with people in the business world. And so we came up with this program called, first version was called Team Up, and then later the 3C program it became. And what I do now is I take 3 corporate executives with me on a sort of 4-month journey. It's usually done virtually now because of geography. And we work through 9 modules of mindful leadership, awareness and development. And they get assignments in each module, how to apply that in their workplace, and then come back and review what experiments and what practices they've tried out and how they worked. And so they evolve a mindfulness practice in their leadership rather than a theoretical view of it. There's a bit of theory, but it's mostly practice. And I love this program, and I'll get the privilege of working with people to do that. And it feels like an honor. It doesn't feel like work to me. I feel really so lucky to have the chance to do it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So that's how I'm applying it. Did that answer the question? I don't know if it did.
Well, in a way, yeah, you know, but what I hear from you is that, and it kind of proves my thinking in this direction, that you know, the development of any skill or in any competency starts from actually kind of the personal development, the self-awareness, the awareness around your thinking models, the awareness around, I don't know, again, the emotions you are experiencing as a result of those thinking, and how you weaken responding or reacting rather based on those emotions. And everything starts from actually awareness around these things and the personal development and personal growth as a real basis and the fundamental kind of.
I've certainly come to that view through my own experiences. That's how it looks to me. I mean, I'm not the absolute arbiter of truth on this, but it certainly looks that way to me. You know, like I meet a lot of people who, when they get the concept, let's say, for example, they get the concept that they accept 100% ownership for everything that's happening in their life, whether they like it or not, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. But if they accept that somehow they're playing a part in those conditions and in creating them, that's a level of self-awareness where the person's got the potential to move to something different. But without that, and it's complete absence, they're stuck in that reality and there's no way out for them. And so I think this is why it's important to sort of try and serve people who are interested in attaining some self-awareness, to be able to make that change, because it is quite a big step for a lot of people. It's not easy. So I think, you know, that's why I feel, that's why I want to do the work I do, because I love serving people who are on that path.
Right.
Yeah.
So I hope there will be more questions in this direction as well. And before you think about to formulate your questions, everybody on the call, I would like to share with you the newly born website, as Ray told me today. I will put it on the chart for everyone to access, but for those who are listening or watching our recording, it's https:// how you call them, slashes, lifewithout.com. Okay,
Yeah.
please feel welcome to visit and to learn more about Ray and about his work and the wonderful book which we all are referring to, which called Life Without a Tie. That's my copy.
That,
Yeah, Jacob, is that right?
Yeah, it depends where you are. In the Netherlands, it's Jacob, but here it's Jacob, which will do
Jacob.
very nicely. Ray, I've had the pleasure of on and off knowing you for the last 25 years. And in the very early days, I knew you when you actually were doing a piece of work at the insurance company where I was working
That's
at that
right.
stage.
I remember.
And you described yourself quite clearly at the moment as a very different person in those years. However, the kind of role which you were doing was very, very similar.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked back at how those people you worked with perceived you in those years? Have you ever asked them, did you think I was an amazing guy, or could you see where my weaknesses are? But
No, I
also,
didn't.
as a
But I could
second
ask
part,
you that question, could I?
no, don't, please.
No.
But secondly, as well, do you feel that the results as an outcome of the change you have gone through are greater than it was before? And how have they changed?
Wow. Yeah. So I'm just thinking on that question, Jacob, because how would I measure that? I mean, I think, with any big changes, there's always things that feel like they're gains and there are some losses. I don't think it's sort of so black and white. It's, I couldn't say it's definitely better. I have a very different lifestyle now than the lifestyle I had as a CEO, when I lived in a house in West London and had a huge income relative to my income now and stuff like that. So there are some sacrifices to be made, perhaps, let's say, for me. But I feel at peace with those in myself. I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to do what I did in order to be at peace. It's different for everyone. Everyone's journey is different. But I feel like for me, the benefits I've gained in terms of the emotional richness of my life and the connections I have with other human beings, which are so lovely, and so much better quality. For me, I feel more proud of myself in that sense. Yeah, for sure. So I'd say in that, how I evaluate it, because one of the things that I did when Charlotte, some of you know Charlotte, my ex-wife, came and presented to me the reality that she was leaving, etc. I realized at that moment I was, just working out, I was about 43 years old, and I'd ticked all the boxes for the life that I had to build. This being when I was at school, being a success means getting a good job, getting a good wife, a house, a mortgage, kids. I ticked all the boxes. And yet I was not in a place where I felt successful. I was thinking, oh my God, I don't feel successful at all. The woman in my marriage is about to leave and my life's going to collapse. I've obviously evaluated or interpreted the definition of success in a way that's not meaningful to me, because I don't feel successful, even though I measure on the success chart like I look like a success person. I don't feel that at all. I thought, I wonder, where did I go wrong? What was in my definition originally that would not be in my new definition of success? So this has caused me to really spend a lot of time and many years in that journey reflecting on that and coming up with a new way of measuring it. Yeah. And so now, for me, like, I get asked the question a lot, what's success? And for me, it's much more, in the old days, I'd say it was about achieving the goals every year, improving the standard of quality of life and these sorts of things. Now I say success is measured by the number of days where I go to bed at night feeling like I've just had a blissful day and I feel really satisfied with how I've shown up that day. So it's a kind of different measurement system entirely. Does that answer it? I don't know. Sometimes these questions are quite hard to answer precisely.
And that's what I have seen in you as well, Ray, because you know how you have motivated me to 10 years ago make a massive change to my life, pack my bag, and my focus was to move into the voluntary sector in a massive way.
Right.
But simultaneously, my belief is all about life is all about people.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what I got from your book very, very strongly.
Yeah.
It's the love you share with people and helping them in their journey.
Yeah, it's certainly a big part of it for me, but one of my 4 core values is love. So I've got a filter and a bias of that one. So it may not be true. It doesn't mean if you're on this call and you don't resonate with that, there's something wrong with you. That because we'd all have a different answer to that question depending on the values we hold. It just happens to be one of mine. But also it's a great opportunity at this moment to just acknowledge you, because Jacob was the person who introduced me to the 2 editors that helped me craft the book. And he was a big supporter of mine in the writer's journey. So thank you, Jacob, for reaching out and doing that, because look where we are today as a result of that. So thank you.
You have done far more for me than I have done for you, my friend.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And I very happily share this story. I was working on a permanent basis for a big insurance company and went through a big divorce, went freelance in the commercial insurance market. And typically, whenever Ray was in the UK, he would always come for an hour, and that's all I got from him because he was busy, and have a coffee with me. And that hour was for me so motivational. And it made a real difference for me just to keep thinking back, what are the values which this guy is sharing with the world? And therefore, what is it I want to take forward? And as you know, Ray, you've been a real inspiration to me.
Good
Thank
stuff.
you very much for sharing, Jacob.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Right. Yeah, Rosita, please, welcome.
Hi. So I'm Rosita. I live in Munich, and
Yeah,
I've
right.
had the pleasure to do the coaching training with BeCoach Academy. And thank you very much for sharing your story. I haven't read the book yet. I noticed that when you were sharing about your hero's journey, you mentioned a few times that somebody told me I should do this. When they suggested that you went and helped somebody for some time and focus on another person, and then when they suggested you go to a meditation retreat, and I assume that throughout this period you also heard other advice, and I'm wondering, can you pinpoint what it was that made you distinguish the things that you want to give a try and the things that you could easily say, no, that's not what I want to do now?
Yeah, I'm much better at that these days than I was in that phase of the journey. I was sort of discovering the power I didn't know I had, if you like. So I was much more experimental with it and sometimes making a mistake, and it wasn't always working out. But one thing that had happened to me in my life, in the old life, which I found a useful metaphor to draw on, was that in the old life, I'd flown airplanes. I was a qualified pilot. And so in an aircraft, you have this piece of navigational equipment in the cockpit called a VOR. And so if you're flying from, say, London to Munich, obviously in the air, you can't see the direction. It's not like road signs or anything. So in Munich, there's an antenna on the ground at the airport, which emits a radio frequency signal in all directions. And it's got a published frequency in a book. So you can look it up and you can tune that frequency in the cockpit of your aircraft with a dial. And then the needle starts pointing towards it. So you just fly the direction the needle is showing you. Now, the problem with that is you could be flying absolutely accurately towards a beacon, but you might have got one of the digits wrong, and you might be going to Stuttgart or Switzerland, still accurately, but going to the wrong beacon. So there's a secondary level of checking, and it's called a confirmation signal. And so once you've tuned the Munich beacon, you then get a Morse code audible signal in your ear. It goes whatever the signal is for the Munich one. There's only one possibility. It has to match to that. And once you hear that and it matches, you're confirmed that you're actually made the right choice. And so I found that metaphor really helpful in my experimentation. I thought, I'm thinking I might want to go to the monastery and do a Vipassana, but I need a confirmation signal. I need to bump into someone or meet someone or hear from someone who's done that and talk to them, and then I'll know it's the right decision or something like that. And so, like, for example, in the book I wrote about, I did something called the Hoffman process in 2010, which is a sort of an intensive personal development workshop. Now, I did it in 2010, but the person who first told me about that was in the late 90s when I was a CEO. And I listened to them telling me about it. And I thought, oh, yeah, that sounds good, but it's not for me. Just put it to the back of my mind. And then in 2008, I did a 2-day workshop in San Francisco, and I loved it. And I said to the 2 women that ran the workshop afterwards, I won't be in San Francisco any longer. I'm returning to Asia. How do I support myself, to keep learning, keep growing? And they wrote back to me and saying, we think you should do something called the Hoffman process. And that was the second time I'd heard it. And then when I didn't follow their advice, I didn't do it. But then about a year and a half later, when I was in London, I met a guy for a drink at his club who I'd seen a few times. And he was I characterized him as a bit of a ladies' man. He liked to drink. He told me sort of stories of his conquests with ladies, and it was all sort of titillating, but I thought, oh, I don't really want to spend an evening with him listening to more of that. I'm in such a different place. But I met him at his club, and the first thing he did when I met him was he stood up and he walked towards me, he gave me a big hug. That doesn't sound weird, but for him, it was completely not who he was. He never did that. And then when I asked him how he was, he answered with a lot of emotional content, how he felt about things that were going on. And I could tell there was something different about him. And I said to him, if you don't mind me saying, you're quite different from how I remember you 2 years ago, when we last met. What's happened? He said, oh, I don't know. I'm not really sure. But about 6 months ago, I did this thing called the Hoffman process. And this is the 3rd time that I'd heard this. And so I got, right, okay, this is a confirmation signal. This is something I need to pay attention to. So I've got lots of examples where that's come up in my life. And I'm sure you could probably think of 1 or 2 yourself, where it's happened to you. You just get this repeated message.
It's nice to have a name for it, the confirmation signal. So thanks for
that's
sharing
what I call
that.
it. Yeah, I call it that. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think
Thank you.
Nigel had a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my situation is I basically gave up my job last year, almost exactly 1 year ago, because I was fed up with working for a large American corporation. And through the wonders of stock options, I was able to finance myself. And I'm currently in the process of trying to move back to the UK and embark on the next phase of my life, whatever that will look like. But I feel very strongly that there's some kind of coaching stroke teaching stroke something pedagogic going on there. But I find that most days I'm sort of busying myself doing stuff which I try to tell myself is investigating all kinds of avenues, but I think it's more like just being busy to distract myself from this sort of void that I'm staring into if I'm not active. So my question is, how much did you actively pursue the next step or next steps, and how much did you say, look, I just need to be patient and let them happen to me, and it's more important that I'm open to listening or to recognizing?
I really love the question, and it's hard to answer exactly, but I know what you're asking me because I struggle in that place myself. Even now, I get distracted and I lose my own focus quite a bit. So, but what I decided in the early stages of the journey to commit to it being an experiment, which took a lot of pressure off myself to try and get it right. And that was a major sort of guiding principle that I committed to. I came up with 10 guiding principles, of which that was one. And so I wasn't so concerned with getting every decision right or making the timing of the decision right, etc. And it's a bit like, I think the best metaphor I've got is like learning to say, if you want to be good to ride a skateboard, I don't know if you do, I don't ride a skateboard, but I've tried it a few times. But when you're learning how to master riding a skateboard, it's all about the feel and how you shift your weight subtly. There's no textbook that you can read. It says, do this, this, and this, and you're going to be the best. It's not black and white like that. You just get a feel for it over a long time of trying it. and you fall off a lot.
Mhm.
And that was kind of how it was for me. You know, sometimes I just focused and went quickly with decisions, and then other times I took forever, sometimes too long, and missed the opportunities. And sometimes I hit the sweet spot, and I just noticed when I did that how that felt, and I tried to replicate that. But that's about as exact as I could answer it, because it was a very much a trial and error by feel.
Mhm.
I don't know. I haven't even reflected on it in any accuracy myself to know exactly at a micro level what made the right decisions be the right ones, or what was the perfect balance. I don't quite know even myself.
Do you think it could be a combination of both proactivity and being open to the solution? Because I know that when I used to work in design and in electronics, and it's commonly known amongst people when we're doing innovation, you wreck your brains for a long time,
Yeah.
and then suddenly the solution comes to you while you're driving home from work, or when you're going for a run or something like this. It
Yeah.
doesn't actually come when you're really thinking hard about it, but you do need to think hard about it to give your brain, if you like, that food to chew on in the subconscious.
Yeah, I guess that's how it is. I certainly had that experience when I was starting to write the book, and I didn't even know what the book was going to be called. But I sat down sometimes for 2 or 3 hours, writing out lots of different titles and names, and trying to use my mind as the tool to crack that. And then I think one day, I can't remember when it was, but I remember just being out for a long walk in the forest or something, and just sort of feeling the sun on my face and just enjoying the nature I was in. And literally in a moment, it just, Life Without a Tie just popped into my head, and I knew that was the title. I just knew it. It just came, it sort of felt like it was handed to me from somewhere. It wasn't like my thinking, but it came through my thinking, but it wasn't my thinking. It was just thinking that landed. So I kind of relate to that as an experience, but all I can do is recognize that experience. I don't have any mastery of how to make that happen somehow.
It's not particularly pleasant.
No. So I wish I could be more masterful with that, because if I could teach people how to do that, I think I'd probably be rich, but I don't know how to.
All right, thanks.
And then I'm wondering if it is also related, Ray, to what you described as, I'm not sure if you actually called it trust in the universe, but you mentioned that how important it is to have a clear vision of what we want to achieve, and then to kind of to let that vision, to send that vision to, I don't know, to the universe, and let it do its magic.
I was fortunate enough to have a clear question that my journey was serving me to answer. How do I live life true to myself? That was the question for me. What does that look like and feel like? And I experimented with that a lot, and it took me 10 years to bottom out that question. So that's how long it took me. Other people have got different time frames if they had that question. But I do think once you've got that, I'm a big fan of the work of Michael Singer. I don't know if anyone else has read his books. The Untethered Soul particularly sings to me, and I've read that book 3 or 4 times. And his whole view of world is, like living in surrender. There's sort of 2 systems for me, it seems. Maybe more than 2, but make it simple. There's this system where you push yourself into the world and make things happen, and it's pushing energy, and you're using your kind of ego and will to drive things. And that works, because I did that as a businessman, and that got good results. I'm not saying don't do that.
To the cost of war.
But there are places and times where that kind of mindset is appropriate, and I think it does have a place. But then there's another system where you accept that the universe has got a plan for you. You might not know what it is or don't know any of the details, but you gracefully accept that whatever's happening is somehow perfect, and you just look for the signs of where to go next and follow those. And I experimented with that way of living long enough to see, that gets quite good results. So I'm going to stick with that for now. And I've trusted it ever since. Maybe it's not for everybody, but it sort of works out. It's working for me quite well.
Yeah. The Surrender Experiment is another book of Michael Singer, where he also describes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because it's quite effortful living when you're pushing. I've seen a lot of people get burnt out and tired and unwell and get ill. It's
Mm.
quite an effortful way. I lived that way for many, many years, and I thought I really want to try a different way, see how it contrasts.
Mm.
Yeah. David.
Hey, thank you, Ray, for all your words of wisdom as usual. I guess a kind of different question, but it's something that's come to mind as she was talking, was one of the things that we kind of, through education, we're often like quite molded into certain pathways through like university and things, and there's often like a perceived plan of how to go about life and things like that. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts, if, let's say, you had control of the education system, how you would change it to enable younger people or the next generation to, I guess, take a bit of wisdom from what you've been through.
Yeah, I do have many thoughts about that. I'm not sure that I can voice them all, here. Well, I try, but I can get on quite a rant about this, so I've got to be careful what I say. I love that. I'm a big fan of these things. I think I've seen them in Poland, and I've seen one or two other countries. They have them democratic schools where there is no set curriculum. The children are just encouraged and supported to sort of find their own way with what they want to learn. And I've seen some amazing kids, come through that experience, like Steiner schools as well, I think existed for that purpose. I mean, Tom and one or two other people on this call probably know more about this than I do. But, to me, the education system that we currently have, certainly in England, is not an education. It's a conditioning, processing system for turning out batches of people that think in a very narrow and similar way that suits the interests of corporatists. That's, if you put it into an opinion, that's how I would describe it. And I'm obviously not an advocate of that. I don't think that works. Sir Ken Robinson, when he was alive, vehemently spoke out about this. He was such an advocate for creativity, and he was such an amazing guy. He made it really clear to us how schools crushed every bit of creativity a child has by making them conform to certain norms. And so it just, into my mind, for the individuals, it doesn't work, but for the system, it works. If you want to maintain the system as it is, then you just keep processing people in that system in that way, and they'll be compliant with the system. So it's a bigger issue. It's not. It's. I think it's quite a big debate. I'm sure other people on this call would have sort of quite a lot to say about this, but that's how I'm seeing it. I don't know if where that leaves you with the question.
No, thanks. I was just curious.
Okay.
Thank you. I've seen Violeta raise the hand.
Yes, thank you. It's very nice to meet you this evening, Ray.
Hi, Violeta.
I started to read your book. I'm in the middle of somewhere. And it very impressed me, just because I am somewhere in my mid-crisis. And what I wanted to tell you is, it impressed me a lot what you said to Nigel, that thing that if you have this feeling, you find this feeling that you are safe, whatever you do, is the most important thing. Yeah. And that reminds me of something very funny. And I was looking for this card. I'm very passionate about tarot cards,
Okay, yeah, great.
And in tarot, there is a card,
Okay, what's that called? The card?
The Fool.
The Fool. Okay.
The Fool. Yes, it's not. Many people think that is about a crazy person who starts in life whatever without any mean of life, any purpose. But the Fool in tarot is actually the archetype of zero. You have all the possibilities in front of you.
Right.
And I remember that when you were we talking, and you answered to Nigel, I remember that I laid the cards once for myself. It was that card, the Fool, and I said, so this guy, I really envy him, you know, because he really has all the possibilities there. And
Right.
I'm here stuck. I wish to be that fool that starts a new life. And there is some fear behind me who still keeps me in this comfort zone. So even for this, and I'm very grateful for this discussion this evening. I promise that I will finish the book.
Okay.
And I promise you that I will contact you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
It wasn't really a question. It was just a remark that I think we should find this I don't know, this courage to be very trustful in the universe, because nothing happens actually.
Yeah.
And
nice. You're welcome. I don't, Eleanor, I don't know if you want, I've got another story that illustrates the power of trusting the universe. It's a short story I can tell. It's in the book, it's from the book, but it just, what Violetta was saying just reminded me of it, because it was Christmas of 2010. I was invited to go to Sydney to spend Christmas with my two friends who lived there, and they featured in the earlier part of the journey the woman who had breast cancer, the same people. So this was 5 years later, that they invited me. And it sounds quite exotic, but I was living, I was in Bangkok, so a flight to Sydney was like £50 or something. It wasn't really a big decision to make. It was very easy to get there. And that year, I'd traveled for a few months with a woman from Canada who I really liked and I was very fond of. And I thought maybe we'd start a relationship of some sorts, but she wasn't in a place where she could or wanted to or was able to do that. So she left and went back home. And so I was sort of on my own, feeling sorry for myself, a bit heartbroken. And I went down to Sydney to spend Christmas with my friends. And I remember sitting in their lounge one afternoon, looking at my Facebook feed, this is 2010, and a friend of mine in Chiang Mai, where I was staying, had posted a photograph of her and some friends outside a yoga studio in Chiang Mai. And I knew the town quite well, and I knew quite a few of the people, but there was one lady in this picture that I'd not seen before. And I thought, oh, wow, she looks, there's something interesting about that lady. She looks, I was quite mesmerized by her photo, and I didn't really know why, but I noticed I was. And I thought to myself, oh, I wonder if Felicity's a friend. Maybe I'll sort of message Felicity and I'll find out who that is and see if she can introduce me to this woman and do all these things when I get back. And I thought, hang on, no, that's the old me. That's me pushing into the world and pushing things to happen. Let me see if I can test this the other way and see if my system of trust works. So I sat in the chair and closed my eyes, and I set an intention with the universe. I said, universe, by the way, I knew this woman was called Sylvia because she was tagged in the photo, and you can tell from Facebook, if someone's tagged what their name is. And I'd looked at her profile. It's one of the creepy things about Facebook. You can see a lot about someone's life before you even speak to them, which is horrid, but I was able to do that. So I closed my eyes and said, universe, when I get back to Chiang Mai, please have me bump into Sylvia and make it really easy. And that's what I asked for. And I just ended it there. And then I literally forgot about it. I mean, I remembered for a day or two, but then I just did forget. So about a month later, I was in Chiang Mai, where I was staying. And I used to go to the track and run every morning to train for the next marathon I was in. And I'd often go to this place called Blue Diamond for breakfast afterwards to get my carbs and get fed. But one day I was getting on my motorbike at the track, and in my head, the voice in my head went, don't go to Blue Diamond today. Go to this other place called Nice Kitchen. So I said, okay, all right. When I get and I thought like that, I thought, yeah, I'll go with that. That sounds like it means something. I'll go to a nice kitchen. I knew the place; it was quite nice. So I went there, ordered my breakfast, sat down, was eating my breakfast, reading the newspaper on my own, and two women walked in, and sat at the next table, and one of them was Sylvia. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. You know, I'd forgotten completely, but the universe hadn't. And she sat down next to me and I thought, God, what am I going to do? You know, I can't say, oh, Sylvia, yeah, I've been looking at your life on Facebook. I know all about you, you know, she didn't know any idea I existed. And so I had to sort of figure out how I was even going to connect with her. And I couldn't. And I was panicking. And eventually she stood up to go and pay for her food with her friend. And as she walked past my table, I looked at her and she looked back at me, and there must have been something in my energy or something, because she saw me looking and she actually said, do we know each other? And I said, no, I don't think so. I said, what's your name? I knew what name was. She told me. I said, well, my name's Ray. Do you live here? She said, well, some of the year. She said, how about you? And I said, yeah, some of the year. And I thought, oh, great, we're talking now. And I said, well, it's lovely to meet you. You know, perhaps we'll bump into each other again, you know, at some point. And she left. And I thought, wow, the universe has had me bump into her. And I did actually connect with her on Facebook, and we became partners. We were in a 2-year relationship, her and I. And it was just an absolute amazing miracle that I ever met her. So you know, this is a great example of the power of trust in that system, you know, if you fully surrender to it.
Yeah. Thank you, Violetta, for provoking another story, inspiring story. Thank you. And we have Tom patiently keeping his hands up.
Oh, my friend.
It's funny, really. I was looking back to the Daily Explorer and Mozzie Bite.
Oh yeah.
Who used to send all these emails out telling us about the adventures of Ray.
Yes.
And it was you that was writing them. And I was always curious as to why you did it in the third person.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first of all, the idea for the blog, I never knew anything. Blogging
let me say a little bit more before you you leap in.
Okay.
It's because in a sense, I mean, I see you now. You're a beautiful human being. You really are. But I've always seen you that way, actually. You know, I went through my stuff and you phoned me from time to time and just reached out. You've been a real friend. And I'm forever grateful for that.
Thank you.
And it's funny that Violetta brought up the Fool, because I have the Osho cards. And I think when you were here, I might even have shown you them, but I've drawn the Fool several times. And it's just at the beginning of the commentary. It says, moment to moment, and with every step, the Fool leaves the past behind. He carries nothing more than his purity, innocence, and trust, symbolized by the white rose in his hand. The pattern on his waistcoat contains the colors of all 4 elements of the tarot, indicating that he is in harmony with all that surrounds him. His intuition is functioning at its peak. At this moment, the Fool has the support of the universe to make this jump into the unknown. Adventures await him in the river of life. And that is you. That is you, and you have embodied that. And I think that's why people love your book, and they love you. So you are a shining example, and you can answer the question if you want. It doesn't really matter. But I just wanted to say that.
Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, thank you very much. Yes, I'm very humbled to hear it. Thank you. Would you like me to answer? Does everyone want to hear the answer? I mean, but I started writing a blog when I began the journey, because one of the 10 guiding principles I set for myself was the principle of connection. And I didn't want to lose the connection with my loved ones and friends and all the people I really wanted to stay in touch with back home. I was a long way away, but I wanted to be present and be connected. I thought, what's the way I could do that? Because blogging was quite a new thing in 2005. It hadn't really taken off, but I saw a few blogs and I looked at them and I thought, oh, I wonder if I could learn how to do a blog. So came up with the idea of writing a regular bulletin saying, this is where Ray is and this is what he's doing. But I wanted to write it in the third person, not the first person, because I didn't want to be showing off about my journey. I didn't want to be, I'm here, look at me, I'm this and that, like, because that drives me nuts when I see that on Facebook and LinkedIn. I hate that. So I thought what I'll do is I'll create a character who'll write about Ray. And that character can write the blog and he can say, I caught up with Ray and I asked him what he felt about this, or I asked him what he thought about that. And I can comment in it with some thoughts, but not be dominating the text and the narrative. And so that's why I chose, because it gave me some distance from the words and it meant I could be sort of humble doing it. But it also meant I could be cynical and sarcastic about things that I saw on my journey that I didn't agree with. And I had the safety of being able to speak my own mind, but not be criticized for it because it wasn't me writing it. But it was obviously me writing it, but obviously, as people know now. But
yeah, well, the name Mozzie bites. I mean, you know.
Yeah, but it was also that was my first shot at writing. I mean, I never I only wrote business reports before that, so it was my first shot at sort of something unusual, different, or creative, and it gave me so much training. I wrote that blog religiously till 2012, so 7 years. I wrote that blog. You know, in every month and every couple of weeks, I was writing, sending pictures, posting where I was, what I was learning, all the insights I was gaining. I was writing in there. So it was a really, and thank God I did, Tom, because when I came to write the book, I actually had almost like a historical record of all these places, which I never would have had. So I'd have lost a lot of the detail in the story of the book if I didn't have that. So I was very lucky, I think. Yeah.
Just one comment.
Oh, sorry, Nigel. Yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to make one extra comment about the fool, because, you know, in the medieval times, they had the jester character who was basically the fool. And he was outwardly making all the jokes and he was outwardly the idiot, but he was actually the only one who could speak truth to the king. I think there's something really powerful in that idea. What outwardly looks foolish is very often the one true thing that you should be listening to. It's a strange paradox.
Yeah. So my comment was going to be about, it's interesting that you mentioned that you chose then to write your blog from the third person, which is different from the way you wrote the book.
Yeah, different. Yeah.
Yeah. How did that work out? How did you decide to write the book the way you did? Well,
I killed the blog off in 2012 because what happened is a bit like it's one of the lessons I learned. It's a great reference point. Yeah, because as much as it was new when I started and I was enjoying the novelty and newness of becoming that person writing it, by 2012, I'd become sort of stereotyped into that blogger. And I noticed that rather than me writing about things that truly I was marveled by, I started reversing it. I started going with my camera to take pictures of things that I could then write a blog about because I needed content for my blog. And I was driven by the need for content, not by the real raw passion or connection I felt for something. And once I noticed that shift, I thought, I don't want to be that guy. I want to be authentic to myself first, forget anyone else for a minute. I just want to be experiencing it authentically for me. And so I decided to stop taking pictures because the pictures were corrupting my experience, literally. I go, well, should I go there or there? Well, that place has got better pictures, which means better blog posts. So I'll go there. And I hated myself for doing that. So I stopped that. So I had between 2012 and 2015, when I started writing my book, I had 3 years kind of change in myself. And when I came to write the book, I went on a 5-day writer's workshop with a fantastic teacher from New York who came to Chiang Mai. And I wasn't sure if it was the right workshop or not, via letter. So I I contacted her and said, I think I'd really like to do your workshop. It looks like it could be the right thing for me, but it's $1,200 and I can't afford that because I'm a budget traveler. I haven't got an income. But I could pay $500, you know, and I've got no experience of writing, so I might be messing it up for the other people on the workshop. Would it be okay for me to be a beginner? And she wrote back, said, yeah, being a beginner's fine. And yeah, you can do it for $500. So I got my confirmation signal that that was the right workshop. So that's how that happened. And then I did that 5 days, and I discovered through the work we did, right, I want to write a memoir about my own journey, and I want to write it as me. I want to voice my own experience. And that was crystal clear for me through those 5 days. And that's how I decided for that. Yeah.
Right. And we are at our last 5 minutes of conversation. And if nobody have a question, I have one more. Ishil, yes, please.
I would like to quote you, Ray, and then ask you a question on that.
Okay. Yeah.
You talked about it, and I think that was a life-changing moment for you, my understanding, and made an impression on me, this place. The experience of being George Pigden blew my mind, and my vision of what was possible had irrevocably changed.
Yes.
So my curiosity is, how do you see what is possible right now? The first question, and after you answer, maybe you can reflect on how do you support others to see what is possible irrevocably differently.
Yeah, so there's such big questions and we've got 2 minutes to answer.
Here's an experience of what is possible right now.
Yeah, I mean, the first one, being George Pigden, yeah, because then I had to consciously adapt and become a character, you know, and learn everything about that. And so that gave me the insight about the nature of being characters. And I saw I can write my own script and words and character for any moment in my life, any situation. It's just there's nothing that I can't do. It's only in my own thinking that I would decide whether I can or not. You know, that was a major shift for me. That took me out of the realm of thinking I thought all I can do is be a businessman. That's what I'm trained for. But it's not true, and it wasn't true. I thought, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something slightly different to that. And how I do that with others, just by having conversations like this one we're having tonight, and just by sharing stories and asking useful questions. I mean, or that get people to explore in their own answers things that they're not necessarily used to thinking. You know, there's some questions I think, and there's a few coaches on this call, I don't like, we have this phrase in England, you know, telling your grandmother how to suck eggs. I don't want to be preaching to the converted here. But, you know, as coaches, it's our job to choose questions which help a person come to awareness in their own thinking that they didn't have before, because the major catalyst for a person's change, and it's the only catalyst as far as I'm concerned that works, is they have to have a new insight of their own. There's nothing anyone external can say to you that's going to force you to change. Nothing. No matter how smart we think we are as coaches, it's not what we say that makes a difference. It's the new insight that the person has for themselves about their own life. That's what causes the change. So the question is, how do you hold a space in which the other person can have a new insight for themselves, and what questions are useful in the service of that? Because a lot of the questions we ask as coaches can give us information as coaches, but they're nothing, then it's not new for the person. They already know what the answer is to the question. So we need questions that they never thought of the answer before. Like, what would happen if you did that? Wow, sometimes people say, oh, that's a really good question. They actually say that while they're thinking. And when someone says that, you know you've hit the sweet spot. When they say, oh, it's a really good question, let me think about that. Because then they're having a new insight as they're answering. So that's how I think it works. That's in my own view of it. Other people might say something different.
Thank you.
So coming to the end and wrapping up, Ray, what would be, I don't know, I personally got even hungrier, you know, as a result of this conversation, more and more questions came up. I think we will need to organize a couple of more wisdom cafes with you in the future.
I'd be delighted to. Seriously, if you do want to, I'd be thrilled to come back and have another conversation. No problem. I'd love that.
That's great. Thank you so much. And so we like to end up every coaching conversation with a question, you know, what would you like, I don't know, to say if there is something remained in you which was not yet, you know, said, so to kind of wrap up our conversation powerfully?
I don't think so. You know, my invitation to everyone is to say, you know, how can you move towards a life that's true for you? You know, if you're not there yet, you know, what would take you just one step closer in the next day or week or month? What keeps you moving towards that life that you feel is the life that's really true for you, and keep heading in that direction?
Beautiful.
That's what I would say.
Thank you.
How do I know that I'm heading in the right direction?
Because you'll get some confirmation signals that will tell you. You will.
So thank you.
This is my permanent question every morning.
You'll know. Your inner wisdom will know. Yeah.
Okay. If you say so, I believe you.
You will.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, dear everyone, for sharing the space, for asking questions, which helped us all to learn more. And thank you so much, Ray, you for your generosity, for your time, and for all the gifts you have brought so far and will keep bringing.
Thanks, Eleanor. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Take a great care of yourself.
Ciao for now, everyone.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.